Welcome, it's Good Friday, and this is another edition of the Zogby Report, Real and Unscripted. You know the drill, and welcome to the new people who don't, but basically Jeremy and I share different takes on the news of the day, and it is really unscripted because generally we really just don't know what it is we're going to talk about. So here's what happened. I did not pick up the mail yesterday. So just about a half hour ago, I went to the mailbox, picked up yesterday's mail, and this was in their Time magazine. So it's Joe Biden on a bicycle, and it says stuck. And so I thought, well, why don't we do the state of the race and determine, what our take is on that image there of a tired looking Joe Biden. And I'm going to suggest to you that he's had a good week, maybe even a couple of good weeks. And I base it on the following. Number one, distinct evidence that all within the margin of error, he's closing in on Donald Trump. So just the three polls that we know about that have been taken within the last 5 days, Biden is within 0.4 percentage points, 0.4 percentage points of Donald Trump. Then, in fact, one of them is a tie, another is a 3-point Biden lead, the other a 5-point Trump lead. Whatever it is, it's narrowed by 2 or 3 percentage points. Evidence, as our poll led the way, of Biden building a lead among independents. So that's one piece of evidence of a good week. Number two, of course, as everyone has learned in the last 24 hours, that the president has a huge fundraising lead over Donald Trump. Before last night, there was $155 million in the Biden campaign bank account to Trump's 45 million or so. But then yesterday, the big event with the current and two former Democratic presidents, Clinton and Obama, raised another $26 million. And we do know that of the $45 million raised by the Trump campaign and its PACs, that a considerable amount of that money is going to be used to pay legal fees. So Biden has a fundraising edge. Now, I will, as commentary, say that a lot of motivation in the support for Joe Biden does appear to be those who dislike Trump much more than they like Joe Biden. It's the exact opposite among Trump's base. They love Donald Trump, and not that they hate Joe Biden, but there is passion, more passion for Trump. The third piece of evidence and final that I'll use for a good week for Biden is another special election, this time for the House of Delegates, the lower house of the legislature in Alabama, specifically Huntsville, Alabama, which is pretty conservative, but as close to a swing local district as you can get. Republican incumbent, closely competitive, but this race, Maryland lands, the Democrat won 62% to 38%. And she based her campaign on, number one, Alabama's almost draconian law outlawing almost all abortions. And then also the not Supreme Court, but the state courts stand on in vitro fertilization. It was a rallying cry, and again, it was women and Democrats who were motivated to vote. That looking to continue to be a very powerful issue for Democrats. Absolutely no predictions, right, about what will happen. And we're talking about two-way races here.
Yeah.
But with that said, what do you think? There are some liabilities. I'll get into those in our conversation. But good week.
Well, I mean, I'll just go back to in February, late February, we had a national poll. Now, prior to that, in January, we were showing Trump ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as we always say, these things seesaw. There's an ebb and flow. Um, and as you point out, follow the trend from polling firm to polling firm. Don't just go with the headlines of the day. You make no rhyme or reason or sense out of that. And so, looking at our polls, because we know them most intimately, because those are the ones we oversee, and we don't get to see the raw data from other polling firms. In January, we had Trump ahead in national polls. In late February, Biden pulled ahead, to your point. But I think what you're looking at, um, when we see this Biden edge in the polls, I think it tends to be in the national polls.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when we drill down to battleground states? I'm sure there are polls out. I know I did see some over the week. I can't remember who. Some show Biden. I can say that some of the, and I won't go into too many details, but the some of the battleground state polling that we did last week showed Trump ahead. So what that reminds me of is 2016 and the result of 2016, in which Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but Trump outdid her in the battleground states, and that's what clinched it for him. And I think what's going on here is that strategy is still very much at play 8 years later, that the Democrat choice of the moment, Biden, um, will show stronger in the national polls when we aggregate the polls of I'm not sorry, not aggregate, but when we just poll voters across the country. But when we drill down to battleground states, we're going to more often see Trump ahead, because I still think that his strategy is very much a battleground state strategy. And so that was the case in 2016. It was somewhat of the case in 2020, though Biden did very well in battleground states. Trump is going to hit Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Ohio, and states like that. He's going to hit them hard. And that's where you're going to see, I think, um, his strategy play out. And we'll see if he's successful or not. That's just a little context to what you said. Now, I do have to mention about why it's not so good of a week for Biden. And I've seen this over the past couple of days, and I've talked about this. I've talked about the official data on job growth, and job reporting, and inflation, and unemployment, and all that stuff, and how when you really get into the methodology of the way that this data is collected, you often see that there are holes in it. And then after the fact, it is released, then it is revised, a month or 2 months later or a quarter later. And what we've discovered is that, according to the Philadelphia Fed, some of those job numbers that came out, some of those reports were grossly inflated, or more precisely, 800,000 jobs were revised down. And so, whatever the optics are of that, how voters process that, I mean, that's probably going to be very partisan. Biden voters are probably going to tend to not pay attention to that. Trump voters are going to jump all over that. But nonetheless, from the Philadelphia Fed, they have updated that data, and it does show that there are indeed 800,000 less jobs that were reported as created. It's just not the case. And so that's in the context of the economy, and the notion that Biden is trying to sell to voters that it is indeed a good economy. There are good things, and it's going to be harder to sell that when we see some of the very things that he's making his case, such as job growth on his watch, is not really the case at all. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Okay, so to your points, look, the president's job performance rating is still stuck at 40%, 39.9, and actually not getting any better. So it's not a question of simply an average. Most polls have them at 39, 40. Very little deviation from that. The other thing that makes it a not good week, we're reminded of at last night's fundraiser in New York, and that is that there were thousands of protesters standing outside against Israeli military policy in Gaza. Uh,
Mm.
there were thousands, and without incidentally, or without um, any significant incident. A few people were uh, extracted, a couple of people were arrested. But the bottom line is let's just talk politics and not morality here. This is an issue that dogs this administration, that it is significantly one sided in its support for Israel. It is backed off of that, but in the process, 32,000 Palestinians have died, and young people in this country, uh, people of color in this country, self described progressives, all very important elements of the Obama Biden winning coalition, are still find this president as guilty and distasteful, and
Mm-hmm.
that will hurt. So, all the more reason why his little bump, there are no big bumps, his little bump in the polls is significant because it's done in the broader context of a wall that he has hit on this issue. And there is no liberation from that wall unless there is a significant change in policy. Okay, so with that said, um, um, we're going into this election uh, this week, pretty much where we were last week and the week before and the week before. This is going to be a seesaw, but it's not going to be a fun seesaw. Seesaws
Mm-hmm.
are when you go way up and then you go way down. This
Mm-hmm.
These are just going to be barely noticeable and probably going to stay like that.
Yeah, well, until big issues come up, and we keep talking about the black swan,
Yeah,
and lo and behold, earlier this week there was an event that, well, it's the implications of it are still unfolding. Of course, I'm talking about the Baltimore Bridge,
yeah.
um, the collapse of the bridge. People who are following this event will know that my understanding is FedEx has a hub there.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon has a hub. It's an important it's an important hub for auto manufacturers. I think GM and others.
It's the
Um,
ninth largest port in the United States.
and one of the most key on the eastern seaboard.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also other factors too. Uh, Hazardous material goes in and out. So all this bottlenecking, and what's going to happen is this: are we going to see over the coming weeks a supply chain shock? Are we going to see prices impacted? We don't know, but a, a, a collapse of that magnitude is something that could have an effect, a negative effect on the Biden administration, as you and everyone else will acknowledge. When it happens under a president's watch, they have to own the issue.
Absolutely.
So how the response will be? This is something we're going to have to look for the following weeks to come. And then that's only part of it. As you mentioned, or alluded to, Israel is ramping up their war. It's now expanded into Syria. It's now expanded into Lebanon. What's going to happen there? What's going to happen in the Red Sea? Are the Houthis rebels going to continue to take out ships, which would imply further supply chain shock? And then let us not forget the Moscow terrorist attack and the narrative battle going on there with Russia saying no, there was Ukrainian involvement, and the United States quick to jumping no, this was had nothing to do with Ukraine. These are further tensions, right? So we're just dealing with so many fronts. The Biden administration is dealing with so many fronts, and
Let
there's
me
a
add one
lot.
quick question.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say there's a lot to look out for.
Yeah. Not very helpful that about 10 days ago, leader of extreme right-wing settlers in the West Bank opened up an outpost in Gaza to implement a plan of building more settlements in the north of Gaza. That, of course, is very troublesome. And the West Bank is something that we cannot neglect to watch. My final point is I had lunch, as I do quite often, with a bunch of guys. I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, a bunch of guys from Notre Dame High School, class of '66, and our star center, Bill Myrna, watches us. Hey, Bill, faithfully every week. And he said to me, I really liked last week's because you kept it down to 14 minutes, and 14 minutes is a whole lot better than 27 minutes. So I don't know where we're at right now, but I'm going to sign off and wish everybody a happy Easter.
Yeah, I'm gonna heed to that advice. How about that?
All right, good. That's why we were undefeated in basketball our senior year. Hello, Bill. Happy Easter, everybody.